Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Anthony. I'm a tech founder and senior software engineer, and today I'm going to break down the cost of running a tech startup. Now, I've started one tech startup 4 years ago and it is still running to this day, and I just started another one a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to run you through and break down the costs for both of those, and I think you'll be surprised by the numbers. And if you like this content, make sure you subscribe. I talk about tech startups all the time and just tech memes in general and stuff, and if you have any comments and want me to cover other stuff and you're curious about other things, let me know in the comments. So first, let's cover the startup that I made like 4 years ago. It is an esports startup, and as you can see, it looks kind of simple. It's for an esport named Valorant, and essentially we cover all the matches. Now, there's a lot going on here. There's like I think 9 active repos that support this development. We charge professional teams for all kinds of like services, and there is a lot of heavy compute processes going on here. We are doing things like analyzing hundreds of thousands of series that get played every single year within the Valorant scene. Scrims that are private to teams also get tracked and sent to our servers, and we just have a lot of stuff going on here. We have like a data team of around 10 people working around the clock to support and maintain all the data on this platform. Now, you might think something like this costs a lot to run in terms of software, but it's actually kind of cheap in terms of server costs. So let me break this down. Number one, we have AWS. When I first started this platform 4 years ago, I had everything on AWS, the deployment, the site, the backend, everything. I have since moved almost everything I can off of AWS. Our AWS bill used to be around $600 to $700 a month, and after moving everything off, it is now only $250 a month, and that $250 is essentially for an RDS, pretty much a Postgres database that stores like hundreds of gigabytes of data on it. Like, we literally have every single competitive Valorant match that has been played within the last 4 years, pretty much since the game has started, in our database. It's the biggest Valorant database of matches, like, I think that anyone has for competitive matches, and it only costs us $250 a month. So while I hate AWS for almost everything else, and if you're a new developer or someone that's creating something for the first time and deploying it, I have been using AWS for the past like almost 10 years now, and I would highly recommend steering clear of it if you can. And even for a database, you'll see in the later part of this video, I don't even use AWS anymore, but if you can, just stay away from AWS. It is such a pain to work with, and there are individual solutions that do everything that AWS can do, but better, cheaper, and a lot more easier, and way less time involved. Trust me. The next is for Heroku. We have around like, I think maybe 4 or 5 Heroku instances up and running to handle various different things. And these are just like node backends that support getting data from different places, because we have so much data coming in from different sources, so many data is going out. We have a lot of stuff that happens on Discord where we have Heroku bots that are our Discord bots essentially, and they run on Heroku. So Heroku roughly costs us about $82 a month. Then we have Versal. So Versal is a pretty cheap cost until they charge you overages, which I have an interesting story about. But pretty much it's just me and my other co-founder. So I think it's like $20 a person for the pro plan or something. And then we pay $10 on top of that just for analytics, which is sort of like Google Analytics. It just tells you how many visitors come to your site and stuff like that. So it's not too bad. However, Versal has been by far the most egregious when it comes to overages and charging you. And I know they made a pricing change to help this, but 1 month we had a bunch of people DOSing our site. And what ended up happening is they sort of caused our backend to crash. And because our backend crashed, our front end would sort of hang trying to get data from the backend. And when your front end makes a request on the server side, it's making that request through Versal. And each one of those requests would hang for 30 seconds, which means Versal would have one of their serverless functions running for 30 seconds at every single request. And what that means is essentially you get 1,000 gigabyte hours for free on the pro plan, but then every 100 extra gigabytes on top of that is $40, which means if you hit your limit, every 10% of what the original limit was is an additional $40, which is an entire month cost. And when we got DOS that 1 month, over like 3 days, we went over this like limit by like, I think 1,000 gigabyte hours, which means we got charged an extra $400 by Versal. And I reached out to them and I tried to explain our situation, and they just never responded. And I reached out to them twice because this happened on 2 separate occasions, and it was just insane. We ended up paying like $600 1 month and I think $400 another month because of these overages. So I have been pretty not happy with Versal, the way they did their billing and stuff like that. I think I remember seeing a Twitter thread where they were thinking of changing it, so it might get better in the future. But Versal, it's like they make it look so simple with like $20 a month, but then once you start getting users, and for reference, like our site gets around 500,000 page views a month. Once you start getting a couple of users and stuff like that, And if anything in your code is not perfectly optimized for like all these random standards they've set up for what they're going to charge you extra for, there will come a time where you will probably get charged extra from Vercel. And that's just a matter of fact. And I love Vercel. It's so easy they make it like seamless to use. They made Next.js. Who doesn't like Next.js other than a lot of people? But their pricing and the way they did that is kind of horrendous. And they make it so easy to sort of fall into that pit trap, and they're very unresponsive about it. I reached out twice, nobody responded. On to the next thing, because I could sort of complain about Vercel for a very long time. We have Uptime Robot. This is just something that helps us monitor uptime for our site. You probably don't need it if you are a newer site, because your site's probably not going down too much, but we pay $10 a month for this, and it pretty much just tells us whenever the site's going down. Next, we have Upstash. Upstash is where we do our caching. So because our SaaS has so many pages, one for each series, so there's something like, I think maybe 280,000 pages for rib.gg. I think it's more than that the last time I checked, like how many pages Google has indexed. We pretty much cache the most popular pages over the last 30 days because it's a lot of intense data aggregation on the back end to constantly pull that data over and over again for all the people that are viewing it. So we use a Redis to cache our stuff, and we use Upstash with Redis. A lot of the times we've gone over our cap and our budget, and they'll send us emails and stuff like that, and they'll degrade our performance. But we found a good middle ground with paying $100, which I think is part of the pay-as-you-go plan. And it's been fine so far. Next, we have BetterStack Logs. This is what we use for our logging and stuff like that. And honestly, the free tier is insanely good. The only reason we're on the small team thing is because every time somebody visits our site, we do a bunch of logging just to like make sure if anything does go wrong, we can track down where it is. It saves us a ton of time when debugging. Over the past 4 years, you can imagine the site has gone down a lot of times, and we have spent a lot of hours, midnight, overnight, to try and figure out what's going on and fix it. So we pay for the peace of mind of not having to worry about not being able to reproduce something or seeing what happens. We have a lot of logs, and because of that, we have to pay for the $85 a month plan. But the support from BetterStack is one of the best supports I've ever seen in my life. I've been talking to the team for the past like 3 months because we had an issue with our billing, and they have been absolutely phenomenal to work with. So I highly recommend using BetterStack for logging. You could probably get away with their free tier. It's extremely generous. Lastly, we have Cloudflare. I talked a bit about this in my other video of tech stack, but I recommend buying your domain through Cloudflare, and I recommend just going on to the pro plan. I don't know why it's like not showing up over here, but essentially the pro plan is like by far more than good enough. It's like $20 a month, and it gives you so much great stuff for it. And Cloudflare is like the best place you can host your domain, the best place to like point DNS records over to your like hosting providers and stuff like that. When we were under attack, I told you we had, in another video I mentioned it, I had to switch us over to Cloudflare and then use their under attack mode to get the site up and running so that I could later on figure out a more long-term solution to deal with the DDoSing. But having your domain on Cloudflare gives you so much peace of mind in the long term. It's the easiest thing to work with. They have unlimited features in case you need additional things. Don't use GoDaddy, don't use Namecheap, don't use AWS definitely, don't use any other way to buy your domain. Get Cloudflare. I guarantee you it just buys you so much peace of mind. That brings our total to $600 a month to run this startup that brings in a decent amount of money just from people using our analytics. It has a Discord bot that people interact with on a daily basis. It does hardcore data aggregation. It has a whole like custom CMS that I built for 10 plus people at a time to be entering data into the database and managing data. It's a giant application, and $600 a month is pretty good, I think, in my opinion. At some point in time, it was a lot higher than this, and then we took a lot of measures. Like I said, we moved out of AWS, blah, 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 to reduce that cost. I should also mention a lot of our deployments was done through GitLab, which I have paid nothing for GitLab, and I have used their CI/CD. We have almost 100. I have made almost 100 private repos on GitLab, and I have like 5 private NPM packages on GitLab, and I've never paid $1. They are by far better than GitHub. I highly recommend it. Now let's talk about the pricing for my new startup. So this is probably going to even be a bit more than like what you guys would pay if you are creating something, especially if it's a project. If you are doing just like a personal project or you're launching your first website and it's not that complicated, you probably are paying almost nothing at all, if anything. So first of all, let's talk about AWS. I don't use AWS, like I said, for anything in my new startup, and I'll just go ahead and show you the website. Very simple website, very simple startup. It allows you to search up an influencer creator's profile. You get a bunch of information on them. You can search up for advertisements that brands have done in the past, and it's to help marketers essentially find like influencers to work with. So that's what the idea is. And while there is a lot of like background processing going on, it's very cheap background processing. So we don't need AWS. We just have a simple Heroku runner for a backend. And I explained this more in my other video. If you're interested in looking at it, the video where I talked about the actual like tech stack, you can see why I'm using Heroku, but it's a basic runner and it's just $10 a month. It's super cheap, super performant. You probably don't need to go past the $10 a month one. Now for Verso, we pay $20 a month. It's just like the basic pro plan. So it is pretty cheap. We use Figma to create all our UX designs. I have another video on that as well. Figma is great because while it has a free tier that might feel limiting, you can sort of just create as much as you want within that free tier. Like they give you access to 3 pages, but the pages are infinite. So you can create like whatever you want in those 3 pages. So I don't think you have to pay for Figma. It's a great tool by far. If you're going to do any UX work, it's like the tool you should use. There's no Adobe XD or anything else like that comes close to how good Figma is. Supabase, you will probably be on the free tier if you're using Supabase and you don't have a lot of records. While this company is new, we already have 65,000 records of Instagram users. And out of those 65,000 users, I think we have 225,000 media objects, so like Instagram posts across all of those users. And because we're querying quite dynamically across those records, we have also records for like embeddings, which are some like AI thing across all of them as well. So we have almost like a million, within a month, we got up to like 1 million records in our database. And that's why I upgraded us to a higher tier database, just so it's a bit more performant and it's faster. But if you're like doing stuff where you're only like storing maybe like 50,000 records at most in your database, you could probably get away with just not even paying for Supabase. So like right here, like Supabase, I think probably Heroku, and like maybe all this Mist stuff, which we'll talk about in a sec, is probably going to be nothing for you guys if you're just running like a basic startup or like your first project and stuff like that. We haven't integrated PostHog yet, but I have talked to some of the guys there and the free tier is extremely generous. It's sort of like BetterStack. It helps you like keep track of logs and keep track of like a couple of different things within your startup. They actually provide a lot of different plans and things that they allow you to record. And it's something that like the majority of Y Combinator SaaS's end up using, and a lot of them are still in the free tier. So I'd recommend checking out PostHog if you need anything related to logging and stuff like that. And even like deployment stuff. I think they have like deployment A/B testing for feature flags if you're into that type of stuff. So there's a lot of great stuff there. I recommend checking it out. Cloudflare, I talked about this, $20 a month, so worth it. Definitely doing it. The UI frameworks like, ShadCN or like Tremor and stuff like that, those are all free. You shouldn't ever pay for a UI framework or a UI template or something like that. There's enough free stuff out there for you to use. And finally, we have some MISC expenses. Like we had to do a lot of AI training on our data. So it was a big upfront cost, and on the ongoing cost, it's like $30 a month. And for our other company, we use Stripe to collect payments from teams, and we'll probably use Stripe again to collect payments from marketers. And they don't charge a flat fee. The fee is usually a percentage of the transaction plus a small flat fee on top of it. So no flat monthly fee. And as long as you're charging like more than like $4 to $5 per use or whatever, Stripe is like pretty good to go with. The transaction fee, the flat transaction fee doesn't really do too much for you. So I would have to estimate if you guys are starting your first SaaS and stuff like that, in all honesty, if you're coding it yourself and you're not like using a subscription to like Bubble or some no code tool and stuff like that, you can get away with like only paying for the domain, CloudFront, maybe like Versal to host the thing in production properly. And that's probably it, honestly. You can get away with hosting like a brand new startup for under $50. And that's the beauty of being a programmer and building something yourselves and knowing a lot about like the industry and what tools are available out there. Because nowadays, a lot of these tools, they get you hooked by giving you that free tier, and then they grow in revenue as your business grows in volume. So as soon as you start getting more customers and stuff like that, that's when these guys start to take a cut. But hopefully by then, you're making enough money to cover that anyways. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next one.